Hello all. Well, not quite what we had planned. This was meant to have gone through last week, but we had some significant technical difficulties. But filling in the work for the Entrepreneurial Media class. Bad news is we won't be able to do Shark Tank or as we were planning to do, and Audrey won't be finishing the class. Instead, I'm going to be condensing some of the work, or a lot of the work that we were going to do over these few weeks. And that would have come through in your preparation to the Shark Tank. So let's start with the basics of business, or building a business, which is what entrepreneurial media is all about. The basics. The basics is that if you're going to start a business, you have to have a reason for it. There has to be a value. Every business, we believe, starts with the three W's. What, why, and who. So what is the what? The what is, why do you need what you are presenting? So, for example, in this case, we have here the light bulb. Why do we need the light bulb when you had gas lights before? More convenience, better light, more consistency, and less dangerous, and a whole bunch of other reasons. Say the same thing about any product you're doing. You could even, but the fact that something might exist already doesn't mean that it shouldn't exist at all. So, for example, when Google first came, there were any number of other search engines, Alta Vista, Northern Lights, and a bunch of others, but they believed they had something better. So the question is what? What is the product? What is the service? What is it that you're providing? And then the next question is why? Why is it needed? What problem is it going to solve, and how is it going to do that? So in the Google version, the problem it solved is it was a better way of sourcing all the information for you. We can say, argue that DC Witness is providing transparency for the court system that doesn't exist otherwise. So, the why. What is the why? What is that problem? Anything you come up with, there needs to be a why. So, for example, there were a couple of semesters ago, there was a student who came up with an idea of crowdsourcing surfing reports. He said that currently the only reports were based on buoys 7 miles out, and that by crowdsourcing the surfing reports around San Francisco, it would be much more useful. Great idea. Clearly something there was a why. Same thing for somebody who came up with an idea of an Uber caddy. An idea here was come up with a student, but from a student who was a golf fan, said that a lot of middle-aged men really needed to be walking on golf courses. Didn't. They rode carts because they didn't want to carry the bags. So by setting up a way of linking young kids or college students who are into golf with these middle-aged men who can have caddies at will, that it was a win-win situation. And then a final one, which I dismissed at the time, was somebody who said that they should have an online service for walking dogs. Of course, Wags and Rover have come along and proved that my doubts were exactly that, unfounded. So, what could it be? It could be a lot of things. Can something exist beforehand? Absolutely. But you need to answer that question, as we were doing on the Lean Canvas. And then, as we've talked about, who's going to pay for it? Ultimately, somebody has to pay for it. As I told you with DC Witness, we have the three revenue streams. While we want philanthropic work, we're also trying to get governments. We've got DC government paying for it, and also want people to pay for the data. So who's going to pay for it? Who's going to find value? Little side note, nobody will recognize it, I'm sure, but that slide is the picture of the bar scene in the first Star Wars movie. Okay, so now that you've worked out the what is it, why is it needed, and who's going to pay for it, then there's a question of getting it straight. What are you actually about? What are you doing? And so the mission statement is the way that has traditionally been done that. I used to poo-poo and think these were ridiculous. But over time, I've come to realize that mission statements are really valuable at being able to set the core of the company. If you don't know what the company is doing, then you're never actually going to get it done. So we have three here, three that are offered, and I'll explain the bottom in a minute. But the three that are offered: we are a global family with a proud heritage, passionately committed to providing personal mobility for people around the world. What exactly does that mean? A global family. You guys can take guesses as you want. So something that considers itself a family or is associated around a family name, a heritage going back a while, personal mobility, and around the world, so global operations. The answer is Ford. Operating a safe and secure government, the second one. This will send everybody for a loop. Nobody gets this. This is actually IBM, International Business Machines, which stopped making business machines about a decade ago, sold it off to China, and now does a lot of things such as Easy Pass and toll taking and other government services. They're in the government services business. So operating a safe and secure business. And the final, do no evil, is what it's commonly thought to be, but that's not actually it. To make the world's information universally accessible and useful, that's Google. So if you see, each of them not only defines the mission, but sort of defines the culture that goes with the company. And here's the most important part. Everything is about money. It is a business. Now, money, there's grubbing and awful and miserable, but the reality is that charging a fair amount and making revenue for it is how any business survives. If you don't charge, if you don't make money, you're not going to survive. But there's an even bigger problem. A bigger question: people think that businesses survive or fail on whether they make a profit. The reality is businesses, it's not the profit. Certainly if a company doesn't make a profit, it won't last long. But if you look at Amazon and a bunch of other ones, they haven't made profit in a long time. How do they get by? Because of cash flow. What does cash flow mean? That means that you can pay your bills. So airlines will go bankrupt, not because they're not making money, but because they don't have the cash flow to put their planes in the air or pay their staff. So it's all about cash flow. Do you have enough money to pay your bills at any particular moment? Back to the model of airlines again. Airlines have incredible assets in their airplanes, so they're actually worth a whole lot of money, and they will make money overall, but can they pay enough to pay off the gasoline and the other charges that they have? So, money is something that a lot of people have difficulty doing, but the reality is everything is a business. And in the media, it always has been. Now, I'm going to talk about journalism here, but we have Joseph Pulitzer, who is, we know, the Pulitzer Prize. Joseph Pulitzer is known for the penny press. At the start of the last century, these two gentlemen, Joseph Pulitzer and William Randolph Hearst, redefined the media. It made it mass by making it cheap for everybody. And in the Pulitzer's case, part of the way he did that was he had a cartoon that was so racially offensive that is featured a character called Yellow Boy, which was meant to be a Chinese character, but it was so offensive that when the term yellow press comes from something that Joseph Pulitzer sanctioned and actually made money off. William Randolph Hearst, famous movie that he was in, or the character of his life. He's also most famous for the story of sending a cameraman to cover the Mexican-American War, Spanish-American War, down in Cuba, and when the cameraman phoned back with a message, telex back with a message saying, "No war here, what do you want me to do?" Hearst is famed to have responded with a text, "You get me the pictures, I will get you the war." So all of it was designed around making money, and often in ways that we today would consider unethical. But it was a business. Same thing when television first came along. Bill Paley, who put together CBS News, the CBS News conglomerate, and built that out as the first major network, he is the person who started news as a loss leader. In other words, they could get the license if they did public good, so he wasn't interested in news. He was interested in news only as a way that they could get a license selling other things. He was the person who fired Edward R. Murrow and removed him after he had stood up to McCarthy because it wasn't good for advertising. David Sarnoff did the same thing at NBC, building the business where news was nothing more than a way to enable him to make money on other programming. So, now to your ideas that you would have done. We would have worked through the lean canvas to come up with an idea. And the thing that all of you have is the position which is so amazing about today, and will probably be even more amazing after the coronavirus subsides, is this idea of disruptive innovation. I'm sure some of you have heard of this, but disruptive innovation is not just a change or an evolution, but something that totally breaks up what has happened before. Let's take television, or just take journal or news. Cable. Cable came along, led by a bunch of people. It had previously been over-the-air broadcast, 3 channels, the monopoly of the networks, or the newspapers, and then along came cable with the promise of not 3 stations, but 500 stations, and a whole variety of kind of different information, including 24-hour news. All of a sudden, it wasn't just another newspaper or another TV station. It was a whole different realm of a smorgasbord to be had. Well, that certainly changed things a bit. But then the internet changed, because cable had still been limited. But then you had the internet, and the internet was an endless bucket and made accessible through search engines, but it was the internet which allowed you to get to access a seemingly endless amount of information. But there was a problem with the internet. The internet was that it was slow. If you remember taking a picture or downloading, if you've seen anything on dial-up, to download a photo, you would click go, walk away, get coffee, take a walk around the block, come back, and your first picture had appeared. And if you wanted to have another picture, it would ping up. At the moment, we get frustrated if it doesn't come up automatically. So the internet was still slow. So that changed with broadband. Broadband changed the whole use of the internet and accessing information because it was able to give it much faster. So that was dated to about the early 2000s. So broadband was quick, but there was even a problem with broadband. To get it, you had to be sitting at your computer with a hard broadband line. And so then along came mobile. This has all happened in your lifetimes. All of this is in your lifetimes. So that is the kind of disruptive innovation that we were looking to see whether any of you were going to come up with. So what you have been doing with the Lean Canvas, as I explained at the beginning, is a modern version of the business plan. The business plan has been an age-old plan that people write up before they would start a business to lay out how everything from what they were doing, the why, the what, the why, the who, and they would go on to do the finances and the management and the administration, essentially laying out not only what it was, why it was needed, and who, but how they were going to do it and how they'd make money, which is essentially what you were working through on your Lean Canvas. And the thing that has happened with this along the way, to give you an example, is what happens when those plans fall apart, and this is why we have the ability for disruptive innovation. So for example, we can take American journalism right now, which I call the GMing effect. Right? It was built on a model of monopoly or oligopoly, or a few examples, and essentially if you had a printing press, you printed money. If you had a television station, you were able to make a fortune. And then along And then what it was like this car, the Pacer, which I'm not sure any of you have ever seen, was very popular for about 5 years, but it was a crap car, possibly one of the worst cars of all time. But it was very popular. Why? Because there wasn't anything else there. And so with lack of competition, and it was able to, GM was happy to make it. And then when along came something better from Japanese automakers, they were unable to move. And that's what happened with American journalism, that it was unprepared for the change of competition for information, for where people get information. So, but some people saw the change coming, and Don Graham from the Washington Post wrote, in 20 years, and he wrote this 20 years ago, in 20 years from now, people will want to know the scoop on the White House, the prospects for peace in the Middle East, and who's pitching for the Nationals, and someone will be there to tell them. We just don't know who that someone will be or how they will do it. And that is essentially where we are today. That is the opportunity that we believe that you have, and that we were looking to see you come up with some form of new media information. He was right. What he was wrong about was that he thought he was still going to be at the Washington Post at the time, and he couldn't make it work, so he sold it to Jeff Bezos. So, that is the idea. What, why, and who. We can get into management and other questions another time, but that's the basic idea that we were trying to get you to go to. And all of that comes down to it having value. Now, what is your plan worthwhile? There are a bunch of measures to it, and we would have put you through all of this and on. SWOT, strength, weaknesses, opportunities, and threats. This was come up by one of these wonderful consulting companies to work out whether companies what their chances of succeeding. And you fill out a grid with what are the strengths, weaknesses, opportunities, and threats of your company. It's a way of reviewing and measuring your business plan. So, we're not going to go into a business plan. You essentially had that in the Lean Canvas. But these are the basic building blocks of any kind of business that we wanted you to think about as you would have come up with an idea over the last couple of weeks and would have moved towards the presentation of the Shark Tank. So those are your basic business blocks. Thank you.